This story begins one fine day when a girl was driving home from one store. There she was able to buy so many different accessories, which were much better in the new collection. Next to her, in the next seat of the car, sat a small doll and many different parts with her image on them. The girl thinks this little girl, who is featured on almost every item she owns, is incredibly cute. In fact, she's just reading a work that is the most popular love fiction novel, and it's called Life in Roses. The main character of this work is a girl named Coral, and she was raised by an abusive stepmother, as well as an incredibly pathetic father. However, despite all this, she was able to discover her talent and succeed with her magical atelier. Coral is very sweet, beautiful, intelligent, talented, and charming. And just like that, all these virtues were able to help her to charm the man Kai, whom she met in the academy. And this work, just like that, tells the hot love story between these two people. And so, when the girl had at least one free minute, she always read this work because she incredibly liked it. But then suddenly she got a call from her supervisor. She immediately panicked because she had completely forgotten about the time. Then the girl picked up the phone and was addressed as the director and asked where she was because the guests had already arrived. The girl drove even faster and replied that she was almost there. She just needed to buy something on the way. However, her secretary said sternly that she really hoped that the woman had not gone out to buy accessories. The principal assured her that of course she wasn't. After a while, the girl finally arrived at her place of work, and as she was going up in the elevator, she met one of her colleagues. The worker greeted the principal, and after scrutinizing her, said that she looked somehow cheerful, and also inquired if something good had happened to her. The girl thought about it for a while, but after that she said that it wasn't that straight-up joyful, but it was okay. At that moment, however, she received a notification on her phone from her favorite novel group. It said that there were additional items in stock, so she was very happy about that. And after that, she went to her office. In fact, after graduating high school, she was finally able to get out of the horrible neighborhood she had lived in before, and it took her a full 14 years of hard work to become a successful makeup artist. Of course, people were envious that she was already able to achieve such heights at a young age. However, it was incredibly hard for her to get to where she is now. When the girl entered the building, she was immediately greeted by the receptionist, and also told that a guest had already arrived. She had even had moments in her life when she was tired of fighting this endless war for success, and was ready to give up, and even after seeming to have accomplished everything, but still unable to take proper time for her rightful rest. And now, as the girl was on her way to one of the very important meetings, that she was suddenly a little shaken. She managed to stay on her feet, but felt herself getting dizzy. The girl assumed that most likely she was just overworked. When her assistant saw this, she immediately went over and asked if she was all right. The principal replied that she was fine and said they could start work. And so on one of those hard days, the girl read another chapter of Life in Roses, and still didn't understand, even after so many readings, how such a lovable character as Coral could even exist. She thought the author of this story was really a genius because he was just an angel. The woman was directly enchanted by the sweetness and beauty of this character. It wasn't until she started to become interested in and fanatical about Coral that it gave her vitality in the end. And now, while the girl went to meet her guest, she decided that as soon as she finished with her work, she would immediately go to the accessory store to buy herself a new one. After all, because she had to go to work urgently, she still had a lot of things to buy, so as soon as she approached the customer, she said hello and told her to start right away, in order not to waste unnecessary time. When she saw the client, she immediately told her that she had already applied sunscreen, and that's good. But at that moment she felt even worse, and her eyes suddenly began to darken. She could not keep her feet, and so fell unconscious. Only for a few minutes at a time, she heard of someone asking for an ambulance to be called and appealing to the principal for her to wake up. But soon, she was completely asleep. This girl was only 33 years old, and just like that, her hard-working life was over in an instant, just because of some recycling. The girl couldn't believe that she was going to die so quickly, because she was upset that she wouldn't be able to buy Rudolph's limited Christmas Coral-themed merchandise. And what's more, she doesn't even know how the story ends at all. And at that moment, when she was in utter despair, God suddenly came to her and presented her with a special piece of paper on which she could write a list of novels in which she could move after her death. For a while the girl could not believe her eyes, and did not know if it was even possible. But she decided not to lose such a chance, and asked God to send her to the world of the novel Life in Roses directly to Coral. At that moment, the girl made a rather bold choice, and God agreed to those terms. So that's how her second life in the new universe of history began. When the girl first opened her eyes, she looked around and couldn't believe that she had actually moved into this world. In fact, until then, like many people, she had thought that such things only happened in stories like this. But now she was in that place. The girl realized that if God had done everything right, she was in the world of the novella Life in Roses, and she thought it was just incredible. When the girl went to the window and opened it, she realized that even the view from it was the same as described, and she decided that if it was the same as in the novella, she could get the hang of it quickly enough. She also had to try several ways to make sure it was true, not a dream. And when she started to kick herself, she realized she wasn't going to wake up, and she had indeed moved. Having calmed down a little, she went to the mirror, and seeing her reflection, she didn't realize who she was after all. After all, the girl did not remember that there was a character with such signs. However, she soon heard some noise behind the door, so she decided to go out and double-check. And as soon as the girl saw this little girl, who was standing quite close to her, it directly froze with astonishment. This little girl had snow-white skin and cute, sweet cheeks, as well as wavy pink hair and blue eyes like a cloud. Without a doubt, the girl immediately recognized the child with genius abilities that will turn the world upside down. A cute, beautiful angel, but only without wings. In front of her stood her favorite character from the novel, namely Coral. Her heart was torn to pieces. She couldn't believe that she'd actually gotten to meet Coral. Then, with trembling steps, she stepped closer to the girl and asked, "Is it really Coral?" The girl looked at her in surprise, not understanding why she was acting like this. And then, utterly frightened, she began to run away, for she was getting very frightened. The girl asked her to wait for a while, but the little girl did not turn around. Then the lady suddenly stopped, not understanding why she had suddenly run away, but then she suddenly remembered the words of this Coral who had called her mother, and the girl straightway could not believe that she had been reborn into the body of the cruel Calypso, who had even been physically violent toward poor Coral. So now it made perfect sense to her why the girl had run away so suddenly, for Calypso had been bullying her very badly. At that moment the woman followed the girl, and when she entered her room she saw poor Coral sitting wrapped in a blanket against the window, crying. She walked over to her trembling daughter and hugged her with all her might, for she was incredibly sorry. Then Calypso said that all her actions before had been wrong to her, and promised her daughter that she would never do that again. She smiled and said that in the future, her mom would treat the girl well because she deserved it more than anyone else. And so the first thing she did after moving to the new world was try to be a good mother to her daughter. And so sometime later, Coral opened her heart to Calypso and confided in her mother, who had previously abused her. And so one beautiful sunny day, the girl and her daughter were strolling through the city. She turned to Coral and asked if she would like them to go to the candy store, and the girl glowed when she heard that, and said she would love to go there. Calypso thought it was very sweet, because now they could even walk casually through the streets, as if they really had always been so close. And while the girl was trying to overcome her feelings in order not to seem strange in front of her daughter, Coral looked somewhere in the direction and saw the man suddenly stopped. She turned to her mother and said that it was her dad, and there was some girl next to him. The girl couldn't see her. However, at that very minute, Calypso came up to her and told her that this was a completely different person, and she had nothing to fear. The little girl was about to object, and said that his back looked a lot like her father's. But her mom quickly diverted her attention by saying that there was a candy store right over there, so they should head over there quickly before they closed yet. It worked, and Coral immediately ran straight to that store, and the girl, turning around and taking one last look at her chubby husband, thought he was just an idiot. It wasn't really her imagination, it was really her father, but he was walking next to some other woman. When evening came, the girls finally returned home, and Calypso put her daughter to bed, for she was very tired for the day. Then the girl thought about the fact that their family had the greatest debts, and the child had been abused, and the father had been unfaithful, and all this was heaped on the poor, unfortunate girl. Of course, this woman knew perfectly well when she read the novella the first time, and never understood why Calypso had married such a lowlife in the first place. But now, as the girl glimpsed her daughter, who was sleeping peacefully and having beautiful dreams, she sighed heavily. And Calypso realized that she absolutely had to divorce this man as soon as possible, before Coral even knew about his cheating, because it would break her fragile little heart. But actually, in the original story, her character also hastily filed for divorce and was left in a very disadvantageous position. So the girl realized that she absolutely had to be careful and, for starters, gather evidence on her husband. Calypso will also have to consult a specialist on how to get divorced properly, after all, in order not to be left fooled. And also the girl will do a thorough preliminary investigation to make sure everything is for sure. And so some time had passed since then, and the girl had managed to find enough evidence after all, so Shubil could already be preparing for her punishment. One evening the girl was sitting at her desk thinking about how she was going to get revenge on her husband. Coral came up behind her and stood watching for a while. The little girl had a bag of candy in her hands and wanted to share it with her mom to cheer her up, but she decided not to, because she had been so busy since the day they went to the store. And then Coral, remembering the father she saw, and the mother who bullied her all the time, realized that she was just an unnecessary burden to them all. The next morning, the girl was in an art gallery with all the incredible paintings. Calypso stood silent for a while, but then suddenly she heard a familiar voice shouting and saying that he had had enough of all this, and the girl turned around and saw her husband. He was very angry and asked what business she was on, calling him when he was so busy. She was of course very surprised at how he could even treat her and speak to her in such an ignorant tone, so the girl immediately wanted to slap him. But she realized that she had to be patient, and violence was not an option. So she clenched her fists and thought about the fact that he was becoming a poor divorced man from this day forward. So he'd had enough trouble. So she came close to him and in a stern but confident voice asked that they divorce. The man, hearing this, was silent for a while, then suddenly began to smile, and then laughing, turned to her and asked if she had really called him to tell that funny joke, and wondered if she had any idea, even at all, how hard it was to get divorced. But Calypso immediately interrupted him and said that Lady Keynes looked very well. That day the man stopped laughing at once and looked at his wife in surprise, and asked how she had known about her at all. Well then, he immediately started making excuses, and said that there must have been some misunderstanding, because he doesn't know how she found out about it. But it's the lady herself who is clinging to him and stalking him all the time, so it's not his fault. Calypso got even more angry at this point, and asked what misunderstanding we were talking about, how he could even lie to her face like that. She didn't understand. Then her husband asked that she calm down for starters, and he would explain everything to her. But the girl interrupted him, and said that she actually wasn't done yet, and then pulled out the little pictures and threw them right in front of him, showing her ultimatum. These pictures just so happened to show him with his mistress and his corruption and their beautiful love. When he saw it, he was panicked and furious. For a while he didn't realize how this could even have happened. He then began to look closer at the pictures, and asked where she had gotten them in the first place. But then he suddenly realized he was burying himself even deeper, and lifted her up and said that of course it was all fake, because she knew he was incapable of such love and romance, even with his legal spouse. Calypso was overjoyed at this point, as she realized that he had been caught after all, and had nowhere to go. So she pulled out some more papers and handed them to him, and told him to read this first. The man looked at them in surprise, and then began to read. It said about the custody of Coral, namely that the girl would take it over completely, and he would be forbidden to get closer to her than 100 meters. When he saw all this, he was shocked, but he continued reading, his hands trembling even more. It also said that all debts would be attributed to Shubil, that is him, and this made him much more angry than the fact that he would not be able to see his daughter. He asked what all this nonsense was and how such a thing was even possible and what right she had to do it. But Calypso was absolutely calm and said that there was, after all, and there was no going back. She pulled out the magic ball and said that he knew that if he was the cause of the divorce, he was the one who would have to pay all the debt. Shubil tried for a while to resist all this somehow, but then he gave up. His legs trembled, and he fell to his knees and said he was wrong. The man began to plead with her and said that they were still married. She should think again. He wanted them to mend their relationship and pay off the debt together. The girl, hearing this, was very surprised, and then, fixing her hair behind her ear and smiling, she asked, "Why should she do that? It wouldn't do her any good at all. So let him pay his beautiful debt with his new and wonderful girlfriend." And just as Calypso was about to leave the room, suddenly someone entered. It was a young girl, and as soon as she opened the door she smiled and turned to the man, calling him her darling, and said that she had come already. The man, seeing her, was very surprised, and asked what she was doing here, but Keynes, smiling, said that Calypso's sister told her that they were getting a divorce, so that's why she came. The girl pulled out iron headphones and told him to move into her house, and she would treat him very well, and there was incredible happiness waiting for him there. She smiled and said that all of this would only come true because of Sister Calypso, so she began to thank her. The man got nervous and said he didn't want it at all and thought there was a catch, but Calypso was tired of listening to all this. She gave him another piece of paper, and as she left, she told him that it was her gift for his future wedding, a gift she was just giving in advance, so she wouldn't have anything more to do with him. Immediately afterward, the girl went and stamped the special divorce papers, and she was overjoyed that she was finally rid of the biggest burden in their lives with her daughter. So after their divorce, all they have to do is live a happy and carefree life together. Soon the girl was sitting in her room, and the maids passed by her, who, as usual, were spreading rumors among themselves. One of the girls asked if she had heard that the lady wanted to divorce the master. Her friend was surprised and asked, "What would happen to this house in that case?" Well, the maid replied that the debts will be paid to the landlord, and the landlady has no savings, so it will probably sell, so they should already start looking for a new job. Coral, hearing this, became very angry. She held back her emotions to keep from crying, for she blamed herself for all their troubles. However, at this moment, her mom suddenly ran into her room and asked if she had been here all this time, and she just wanted to personally inform her, so she came. Coral immediately turned to her and asked in a pitiful voice what she wanted to tell her. Calypso then asked her daughter if she wanted to continue to move on with her. The girl, hearing this, could not believe her words and asked her if it was really true. Her mom suddenly got nervous and said that of course it's going to be a little complicated, because adult stuff and all that, so she can't explain in detail. But she's decided to break up with her dad, and she wants to live with her. Calypso also told Coral that she wanted to promise her something very important, namely to make her happy. She would be willing to do anything, so she offers her to live together, but then suddenly the girl was very surprised to look at her daughter, for Coral was standing there just crying. The girl didn't understand what was happening and was even frightened. She asked if she had a pain somewhere or if she had said something wrong. Coral wiped away her tears and said that not at all, she could care less. Then she said that she wanted to live with her mommy too. Calypso looked at her daughter and was ready to cry herself. She couldn't believe that even after all those years of humiliation and insults from her, the girl still agreed to this huge step. She was actually very worried about it. But it's very good that everything is resolved. In order to live happily together with Coral, she needs a lot of money. So the only thing left for her to solve is this problem. Soon afterward, the girl went to a place that was quite popular in the city. A guard met her at the entrance and gave her a special ticket to get in. It's actually called Manulite, and it's the best place for a romantic night in the entire empire. Some go there to find a partner for just one night, and some want to find a partner to change their life. Calypso herself came to this place to make some money for herself, and when the girl came to Lady Maria, who was in charge of the room, she immediately greeted her, for she was glad to see a noble lady, namely Lady Calypso. When the girl saw her, she couldn't understand who could have done her makeup so beautifully. Lady Maria was very provocatively dressed when she approached Calypso, who said she had good news for her. The girl said she could take it easy, and in case she did, she could wait. But at that moment, she heard the ladies behind her talking. One of them said that some people were saying that Prince Macaroon had refused the proposal. The girl asked in surprise, had there already been rumors of even that? Her friend replied that apparently he was very nervous before the competition that determines the crown prince. And even this monstrous prince somehow got nervous. What to speak of the others? Calypso, hearing this, was very surprised, and then thought, are they really calling the main character's father a monstrous prince? In fact, in the Romantic Empire, it is only through a contest of choice that the crown prince is appointed. And currently the most likely candidate is just the second prince, a man named Macaroon Crate. However, there were quite serious rumors surrounding him, with many people saying that he was a monster. Many also talk about Prince Macaroon fighting monsters during the war, and since the war ended, he just went crazy. The ladies in that house also discussed the fact that all the women who spent even one night with him were immediately killed, and no one ever saw them again. Calypso was fixing Lady Mary's horrible makeup situation, and in parallel was also listening to their conversation. One of the ladies asked what kind of woman would even dare to marry him, but her friend said that even if this lucky girl marries him and then dies on her wedding night, it makes absolutely no sense at all. She also added that she wouldn't be able to go near such a thing, because it's just too scary. The girl, upon hearing this, thought about how this was some rumors that were too vicious for just one person. In fact, Ravienrose is a world where beauty is given much more importance than it is in a girl's real world. Every 4 years, a momentous contest is held to select the most beautiful men and women of the empire. And beauty plays quite an important role in society as well as social status. Consequently, the demand for cosmetics is simply explosive. However, the supply is not keeping up with the demand nowadays, and even aristocrats have a hard time finding a good makeup artist who will take into account the norms of fashion and what suits the person himself. And makeup technology is kept in strict secrecy, available only to professionals, so even girls themselves cannot make a normal makeup. It is for these reasons that makeup has not become as popular in this world as it is in the regular world. However, for Calypso, reborn into the body of a girl, this world has opened up new possibilities for her to realize. And now she's brought a product that combines a girl's magical powers with her makeup skills. So in this house, the girl was much appreciated for her abilities. And on one such day, a lady came up to her and asked if she could show her again how to use corrective makeup. Calypso, smiling, pointed to a small jar and asked if she could try it first. The girl was very surprised, and she asked what it was since she had never seen it before. Then she explained that this product was called Wind of Change. It was produced by her personally with the help of magical equipment. She gave her this product in her hands and told the girl to press this button, and then she could easily change her makeup to a feline or floral style. And then, depending on her preferences, the girl's makeup will be up to her, and it doesn't take more than a minute. Calypso said that the quality is much better than other products, and she won't find such a composition anywhere else. So the girl publicized her great and miracle product in front of everyone. Well, seeing the admiring faces of the candidates, she said that this product only lasts for 30 minutes, and if they want to extend that time, they can purchase additional filters. She said that the price was quite even reasonable, only 2 gold, and there was a special sale for them. So they'd better hurry up, as there were only a few copies left. When the girls heard about it, they immediately pounced on it, saying that they definitely needed at least one such thing. Calypso was very happy at this point. She thought about the corals and realized that they could get rich very soon, but she shouldn't be in a hurry. Soon the girl came back for the coral and took it home. She asked if she had fun, and the girl said of course she did, and began to tell what they had done during the day. But at that moment, a maid suddenly came to her and told her that a letter with the imperial seal in it had arrived. She was holding it in her hand. Calypso immediately began to open it, and she was surprised and wondered if something had happened at the palace, since the letter had come from there. The letter said that the promised period had already expired, and also asked if she was able to survive the divorce well. It also said that she was eagerly expected to be contracted soon. The girl, when she read about it, was very surprised. She didn't understand what kind of contract it could be. Then she decided to read the letter, and saw that it said that Calypso and Macaron had vowed to be married in months. When the girl read about it, she was just furious. She didn't understand how such a thing was possible. And then she immediately wondered who the real Calypso was before her incarnation, and she was pretty sure there was no such plot in the original novel. After all, in the original, Calypso, after her divorce from Shubil, had to pay off huge debts and try in order to survive. Coral is then sent to boarding school, and Macaroon Crate turns out to be the father of the main character, Kai. That being said, Coral and Kai are supposed to be together. After all, they are parents. So now this one is really bothering the girl a lot, because the plot wrapped up clearly in the wrong direction. All this time she had been trying to remember where she had heard about this story of the marriage between Calypso and Macaroon. It scared her to realize that it was really possible. And after some time of thinking, the girl finally remembered that in the fanfic Ravi and Rose, the main characters are Calypso and Macaroon. Their roles in the original were not as significant as Kai and Coral were in the foreground, of course. In the fanfic, Calypso promised a man that in 6 months she would divorce her husband and marry him. This little story begins just as they are getting married, and when she read the story, she didn't notice a single page about Coral herself. It was as if she had been left out of it. The girl thought to herself that everything was too good to be true. But she was still desperate, because she couldn't believe what had just happened. Because of her strong emotions, she couldn't even stand on her feet. Because of her aspirations, she said that nothing in this life is ever easy for her, and even the second life she had so much hope for was failing her. But at that moment, Coral came up to her and told her mom with tears in her eyes that she didn't know what she had going on. But she was there for her, and Calypso looked at her daughter and immediately ran over and hugged her, also crying. She realized that she did have the Coral, and that the future could still be changed. However, she no longer had the past before her rebirth. Now that she had calmed down a bit, she didn't even realize what the nonsense was and why she was so worried, because she was able to survive death and rebirth, so would be able to cancel some sort of marriage contract. So soon, she decided to go and visit Macaroon. After a while, she took Coral with her and gave her a defiant makeover for an impressive look with no time constraints. When they first arrived, the girl stared at the house for a while. She realized that because it belonged to the prince, everything was different in this place. But she tried to keep her nerves very far away because she shouldn't panic. Suddenly, 2 guys with very bright red hair came up to them. One of them said that since they had already arrived, His Majesty was expecting them. But Coral, when she first saw these men, immediately hid behind her mother, for they frightened her very much. The girl, when she noticed it, was very surprised. She did not expect her daughter to be afraid of them. But then she turned to the men and asked if they could look after the girl while she talked to His Highness. The men agreed. They didn't have much of a choice. Then Calypso leaned over to her daughter and asked if she could stay with the men for a while, for her mother was about to have a very important conversation. The girl was still very scared, but she agreed and stayed with one of the men who took them to the house. Calypso bade her farewell and told her they would see each other very soon, and the other man escorted her to His Highness. As soon as they entered the room, the man opened the curtains to let daylight into the room. His Highness's aide turned and said that his guest had arrived, Calypso. When she saw the man look at them, she was immediately shocked, for she could not believe that this was really her daughter's father. This man had a keen gaze, a strong body and fairly long legs, and he was more handsome than the girl had thought to herself. So that surprised her a little, but she couldn't stop looking at his face and finding more and more beauty. This made His Majesty very uncomfortable, so he coughed. The girl immediately realized that she needed to stop staring, so she decided to introduce herself, saying her name was Calypso. The man just waved his head and didn't even shake her hand in greeting. He said it wasn't their first meeting, so they better get right down to business. The girl was uncomfortable for a while, but then she remembered that they had met before. But she was still annoyed that he seemed to be having a hard time listening to her. However, at that moment, the man, who had also been looking at his guest the whole time, came closer and asked what it was on her face in the first place. Calypso frowned slightly, not sure what he was talking about, but then realized he must be referring to makeup. But the man did not broach the subject for long. So he turned around and said that she could sit down. The girl was a little surprised. She could not understand whether it was so difficult to make at least some compliment to the girl, but she decided not to pay much attention to it. Calypso concluded that he was indeed a very strange man, not like the others. They were soon brought tea, and his assistant said the papers were ready. His Majesty took it, and after checking that it was all in order, handed it to the girl, telling her to read it and sign where necessary. At this point, she started to feel nervous, because she hadn't felt that way before due to the strange nature of the macaroon. However, if she looked closely, it was obvious to her that the girl couldn't wait to paint it. She began to smile, thinking that she really wished she could put shadows around his eyes. Suddenly, the anxious assistant turned to her and asked the mistress if she had heard his explanation. The girl immediately realized that she had to come to her senses, because his beauty was detrimental to her attention. So she immediately looked at the assistant and said that of course she understood everything. Calypso set the cup on the table, realizing she had to wake up. You see, she had come to terminate that horrible contract. So the girl turned to His Majesty, who had been sitting looking at her the whole time, and said that she wished to speak to him. Then she suggested that the two of them pretend as if this contract had never happened. The man was a little wary, and then said that he really should have told her earlier, but the girl was obliged to keep her promise. He looked at his guest and asked why she wanted to cancel the contract like that. Calypso pretended to be very concerned, then tearfully said that she was actually seriously ill, and they had caught her hot. Of course her tears weren't real, and the man apparently suspected something, but ignored it, saying it was really unfortunate. But she looked quite healthy. The girl kept insisting. She said that she wasn't going to tell him, but that she was actually addicted to gambling lately. His Majesty smiled and said that he actually plays a bit too, but it doesn't happen too often, so he doesn't get carried away. Calypso started coughing hard and said she had to be honest with him, because she was actually allergic to men. His Majesty said that he was actually allergic too, but only to women, and coughed a little to make sure. Calypso realized that she couldn't convince him, so she asked him why he was so insistent on marrying her. She doesn't get it. She also said that he had recently turned down a proposal, so why shouldn't he try with someone else? His Majesty became very serious and said that she must have heard about his reputation, so no one wanted to marry him. Then he smiled and said that no one but her, of course, and he didn't know what had made her change her mind, but he planned to divorce her in a year. The girl was about to object, but was surprised to hear it. She asked what "after a year" meant. His Majesty said that the duration of the marriage was 1 year, and in case of divorce she would be paid compensation of 1 billion derkas. He also said that it was the main condition of their contract. At that moment the girl wondered what was more important, Coral and Kai's love or money. Calypso thought of the many problems this money could solve, including paying for academy tuition, business funding, and a secure future. She tried to calm down, telling herself not to give in to tempting offers. After a short silence, His Majesty suddenly inquired if she had not forgotten the fine of 30 million dirks. The girl was even more surprised and realized that, in the end, money trumped Coral and Kai's love. It was cruel, but real. After a while, he said it would only be for 1 year, and she'd better think it over again before making a final decision, because there would be no going back. The girl thought that in a year all the problems should be solved, and there was nothing wrong with a fake marriage. Children are not so good at remembering details from childhood. Calypso thinks that if the main characters have more memories together, it will only be good for the future. With a heavy sigh, she asked if she was right in thinking that she wouldn't have any problems after the divorce. His Majesty said that everything was right, and she would have no problems. She would continue her carefree life. And having heard all she wanted, the girl said that in that case, she would consent to be married. The man was not surprised at all. He continued to sit calmly, and said that since she had made up her mind, it was not a bad thing, and the details would be spelled out in their contract. It was written into the contract that Lady Calypso would use the East Wing, and Macaroon would use the West Wing. Also, except for official events, they will not interfere in each other's private lives, and there will be no marital relationship between them. And at the end of the 1-year contract, they divorce, and Lady Calypso will pay compensation of 1 billion deks and take possession of Lloyd's Island. And now that the girl had read everything, she realized that the terms were really not bad. And if they'd just got married for a year, she wouldn't have to worry about money anymore for a very long time. At this time, the girl sat opposite the macaroon and read out carefully all the terms of the contract. Also from behind the door looked out a little boy, who was watching all this. When he saw the stranger, he realized it was exactly that. It's the new mom his dad told him about. He was very excited when he saw this woman because, in fact, he had wanted a mom for quite a long time, and now this moment had finally arrived. But then suddenly the macaroon spoke up and said that there was also one more thing. He had heard that Kaya was going to have a half-sister. Calypso looked away from reading the documents and said that was correct. The girl was currently 7 years old. Kai, who had been eavesdropping on the whole thing, was very happy that he was going to have a sister too. The man interjected that he was correct in his understanding that she was younger, and then added that he really hoped they would get along well and could even become friends. He also inquired what the step-girl's name was. Calypso smiled and said that this girl's name was Coral. Kai, who had listened to all this, was very surprised and couldn't believe that it was really true. In fact, one day when Kai was sitting at his academy as usual, he was all alone and studying a book. The boy's classmates were standing nearby. One of them bragged about the potion his mother had bought him. He also said that if he drank it, he would have great strength. The other boys immediately encircled him, for these were very curious to see it, and soon the boy drank the potion, which was of a delicate blue color. And within a second, the boy had grown huge muscles. He began to show them off, asking his classmates how he felt about such a sight. Everyone immediately started cheering him on, but at that moment the boy turned his attention to Kai, who was sitting all alone nearby. He walked closer to him, and seeing a small potion bottle, he asked what exactly this potion was. Kai didn't really like all that much, so he just shook his head and said there wasn't much there, but the boy was unwilling to stop. He immediately grabbed the bottle and said there must be something cool in there, so he drank it. The boy tried to stop him, but it was too late. And in that second, he suddenly grew ears and a nose like a pig, and he even started grunting. The boy felt all this, even got very upset and started crying. The other guys, when they saw it, immediately started laughing, saying they had never seen such a muscular pig before. But soon the female teachers came to visit, and when they saw him in that condition, they asked if he was okay and what had happened in the first place. Then also called his mother, who was concerned, having considered her son, told the teacher that they urgently need to go to the hospital, because he must have eaten something strange. Of course, the teacher did not object and let them go. Kai was sitting very sad at this point, because he had been brewing this potion for a month, and that boy just took it and drank it without even asking permission. But at that moment his sad thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the voice of some girl who had bright pink hair, and she came up to him, asking if he was okay at all. Kai was immediately embarrassed, but Coral insisted and said that the child must have accidentally drank the potion he held so dear. The boy replied that there was nothing wrong with that, and he was perfectly well. But of course Coral didn't believe him at once, and asked if he was sure of that, for if he wasn't feeling well, she wanted to show him a nice thing. But since he was fine, perhaps she shouldn't do that. Kai immediately wondered what she could show him, and then wondered what exactly that thing was. Coral smiled and said that if he was so interested, he should come to the academy courtyard after his next class, and she would be happy to show him. The boy was still in doubt for a while, but soon he went out into the yard and met a girl who was sitting there playing with rabbits. Coral showed him one of them and asked him how about this one, for he was just adorable. In fact, the rabbit was incredibly angry with the girl, for she was holding him by force, and he wanted to get out and run far away from human hands. Soon she did let the rabbit go after all, making a nod to her friends, for the rabbit was lashing out hard. Then Coral said that apparently they loved their mommy very much, and were always chasing after her. The girl came closer to the other rabbits and said that their mom was so scary, but very brave and strong. After that she turned to Kai and asked him what his mom was like. The boy was a little embarrassed. He realized he couldn't talk about it. The boy didn't want to talk about the fact that he didn't have a mom, because Coral would probably be disappointed. But he just hates doctors. So he decided to change the subject, saying that the lesson was already starting, so they had to go quickly. Kai was very hurt, because he didn't understand why everyone else, even animals, had a mom, and he didn't. Of course, his daddy was the best, but still. Well, of course, sometimes you really want his mom to just give him a hug and support. So if he had a mom too, it would make it easier for the boy. And now when the guy heard about it, he was very surprised. But he didn't expect that the girl could be his half-sister. At that moment, however, he was suddenly interrupted by the voice of one of the house staff, who had just come up with Coral. The man turned to Kai, and the girl herself asked what he was even doing here, for she hadn't expected to see him. But Kai was very angry. He turned to the girl and wanted to ask her why, but the worker interrupted him. The man turned to Lady Coral and said that this fellow was their young master, a boy named Kai. When the girl heard this, she was very surprised. She had not expected that this was where he would live. The boy was very angry at this point. He could not believe that his new mother was also Coral's mother, but he decided not to show that he was angry. So he smiled and told the girl that that was right. He lives in this place. But then suddenly Kai turned around and waved goodbye to her and said that he still had a lot of things to do. So he would go already. And he himself was incredibly angry at that moment and thought that Coral should wait a little while, because he would bring everything back to the way it should be. The boy also thought about the fact that if it was his father, he would surely listen to his request and heed it. For quite a long time, the girl resolved various questions about this contract, and they finally went home already, closer to the evening, when the sun began to go behind the horizon. In fact, she was very worried, for her daughter had been silent ever since they had first left the palace, and the girl suggested that she might not have liked something there. After a while, Coral's friend spoke up and asked if this was their new home. Calypso immediately tensed. Then she wondered if she didn't like him. The girl looked very serious for a while and just kept silent, apparently thinking about what to say. Then Coral smiled and said she wasn't at all. But of course the woman could see that something was bothering her, and she resented her for lying to her face. Her mother apologized for it being too sudden, but she said she and His Majesty were planning to get married. And if they get married, Coral can do whatever she wants and even eat whatever she wants without thinking about the price. But Coral suddenly took her by the skirt and told her that she didn't need all that. She only needed her mom and nothing else. She tearfully said that the two of them could handle everything, so they definitely didn't need any help from outsiders. Calypso was about to say something to her daughter, but she interrupted her and told her not to leave her. When the girl heard about it, she was very surprised. She realized that for Coral, who had been rejected twice by her family, it was very hard for her to go through all this. But to reassure her daughter in some way, she sat down on the level with her, and tucking her hair behind her ear, told her that she wasn't going to leave her in any way. Calypso said that would never happen, because she is her favorite girl and she wouldn't dare leave her. At that time, when the guests had already left, Kai walked into his father's office, who was just sorting out various papers, and sternly asked what this was all about. The man looked at his son in surprise at first, not understanding why he was reacting this way. And when he was about to say something, Kai interrupted him. The boy was very upset and told his father that he didn't want this woman who came to see him to be his new mom. Macaron was very surprised and asked why that was the case, and wondered if having a mother wasn't what he had been hoping for all along. Kai wanted to say something, but then he changed his mind and answered that he didn't need a mother anymore. He could manage on his own. But the man turned to his son at that moment, saying that they had already signed the contracts, and there was no turning back. He wondered why he had suddenly changed his mind and become more aggressive. The guy already wanted to say something, but he was too angry and frustrated. So he just kept silent, and Macaron wondered if he had something he didn't know. As much as he didn't think so, they'd already signed a contract with that girl after all, and he couldn't break it and leave one woman with a child in such a terrible position. So he took his papers back and told his son that there was nothing more he could do about it. So he would have to accept this news, and he wanted to stop discussing the subject at that point. Kai was very upset that he couldn't get anything accomplished, but he still said that since there was nothing he could do, he would go. The boy understood perfectly well that there was nothing more his father could do, so he made the decision that in that case he himself should think of something. The next morning, Calypso and her daughter moved into the manor. The butler and the maids met them there and told them that they would take them to the east wing where they would be staying. They soon came to a rather spacious room, and the butler said that they would now live there. When Calypso saw it, she was thrilled because it was so much better than her house, and even though it was a sham marriage, Macaron showed some sincerity toward her. When the servants had gone, the girl turned to Coral and asked if she liked the new room. The girl was delighted, for there was plenty of room for her to run around and have fun. The girl was glad that everything worked out this way, and she realized that Macaron had a very even taste in furniture, for everything was simply luxurious. However, at that moment, Calypso suddenly smelled some horrible scent, and she didn't understand what it was or where it was coming from at all. Of course, when the butler had first brought them in, he had said that if they suddenly didn't like something, she could feel free to go ahead and be sure to tell him about it. He would do his best to make it right. At that point, the girl said that everything was just perfect, only that she doubted anything would be wrong, but she assured him that if they ever needed anything, they would be sure to let them know. The girl began to look around quickly for the source of this odor, but there was no way she could find it. At that moment, Macaron suddenly walked in on them, asking his wife and daughter if they liked the room. As soon as the man walked in, he immediately smelled that awful aroma and decided to leave. He didn't want to stay in this place a minute longer. Calypso immediately asked where he was going, but Macaron didn't want to linger over that smell. He said he had urgent business and would be back soon. The girl tried to stop him, but it was too late. She sat down in the middle of the room, not understanding what was happening on their first day of arrival. For a while she just sat there sad. But then she decided to find the source of that foul odor. She saw that there was a vase on one of the nightstands near the mirror with sticks sticking out of it. The girl took it, assuming it was the source of the odor. Just then her daughter called out to her, and Calypso was a little surprised, but went straight to her. It had been a full week since moving into the mansion, and even after the stinking incident, strange things continued to happen. There were many problems, but the biggest one was that the maid they had been allocated behaved in a disgusting and disrespectful manner towards them. This girl's name was Sarah Chamberlain, and she was a person who had not an ounce of decency or respect for other people. From the look on her face, Calypso immediately realized that she thought she and Coral didn't belong in this house. In the first few days after the move, the girl didn't have time to care about it. But as time went on, she couldn't take this kind of treatment anymore, and she needed to do something about it. And then at one point, when Sarah had once again shown her disrespect to the girl, the latter pointed at the door and told her to get out. The maid was very surprised and didn't understand why the mistress was suddenly so angry. After all, she hadn't done anything wrong. However, Calypso said she meant what she said, and when the girl did nothing, she asked her again if she had heard her. The girl asked her to step out and come in normally. Sarah, of course, was very angry, but she restrained herself and left the room. She stood for a while, and then knocked again to enter. When the maid opened the door, she began to ask with a gruff tone why the mistress had called her. However, Calypso quickly interrupted her and told her to get out. Sarah got angry and asked why she was doing this to her. The girl told her to think about it, and then she would understand. But when she saw that Sarah wasn't going to leave, she asked in surprise if she really wasn't going to leave. The maid had nothing else to do, so she headed out the door once more. Calypso wasn't really surprised, for this wasn't the first time she had encountered situations like this, and a beast that decided to suddenly bare its teeth had to be shown where it belonged. Soon the girl allowed Sarah to enter, and the maid, holding back her anger and rage, asked how she could help. Calypso, hearing the right answer, smiled and asked the girl to bring her Kai's education records and accounting statements of the salaries paid. Sarah was surprised and indignant when she heard this. However, the girl said that she did not have to worry about her son's education, because she would take care of it. The girl in turn said that it could not be done because she had always taken care of the wages of the castle workers herself. Calypso thanked her for her labor, but emphasized that it was not her concern anymore. She asked Sarah to bring her the papers, but the maid suddenly became anxious and asked what she should do about his childish pranks. Calypso smiled and said, apparently she still didn't understand anything. A girl needs to follow those who are above her. It means that she obeys her. And the girl looked angrily at her and said that if she kept taking on too much, she'd better leave this house right now. Sarah was badly frightened, ready to cry, but held back her emotions and just ran out of the room to do mistress's bidding. At this moment, the girl thought that the macaroon had probably been in the war for too long to worry about the small domestic chores and delve into them completely. That was why there had been such a misunderstanding. Certainly Calypso understands everything. However, when they brought her all the papers with calculations and cases, she was incredibly surprised because she didn't understand why there were so many of them. The girl realized that she would probably have to work hard on just the paperwork for a while. And even for the sake of Coral's future, she should get the paperwork sorted out and everything in order. But at that moment, she suddenly, while examining one of the papers not far from her, saw some yellow curl that caught her attention. As soon as the girl uncovered it, she was very surprised. She immediately grabbed it and ran to her daughter's room to Coral. The girl was startled by her mother's surprise, but Calypso quickly handed her a paper and told her that a letter had arrived about her final enrollment in the Imperial Academy. When the girl heard about it, she got excited and then asked if it was really true. When her mother nodded, they danced around the living room, for it was very happy news. But then suddenly Calypso stopped and asked if they were getting too excited. She might be making a friend at the academy that she wasn't telling him about, but Coral immediately said that it wasn't like that, and she was just glad to finally have something to do. The girl looked at her in surprise and asked if that was really true. Of course, she could see her daughter's lies from afar, and then she turned to Coral, telling her that her mother loved her more than anything in the world, and they would live together for the rest of their lives, so she could feel free to tell her everything. Coral agreed with her and said that they would live very happily ever after. Of course, the girl was joking a bit, but her daughter's reaction was still very amusing. And no matter how mature she is, kids her age are still incredibly cute. And so, while they were not celebrating their little victory, someone suddenly knocked on their door. The girl was immediately alert, not realizing who it was that had suddenly come to the Coral. Soon the door opened and a boy appeared. It was Kai. He was dressed in his school uniform and turned to Coral. Calypso was very surprised when she saw him, but she said hello to the boy for the sake of decorum. This was her daughter's room after all. I didn't expect to see her here, so I was a little startled, and there was an awkward silence between the children. The girl didn't understand why they were just standing there looking at each other, but then I realized that she was definitely the reason his first love had turned into a half-sister. So she suggested that she should show a little understanding. She told Kai to come through, and also told her daughter that she had some urgent paperwork to do, so she was leaving them alone. When the door slammed shut, the kids also just stood there and looked at each other for a while. They were too awkward to talk, but Kai had come to see the girl on business, so he spoke first and said he was missing a notebook, and wondered if she happened to know where it might be. Coral went to the table at that moment and took out a small green book. Then she gave it to the boy, saying that it was hers. Kai leafed through his notes angrily for a while. Then he took out a small piece of paper. He looked pitifully at the girl and asked, did she really read everything that was written in it? In fact, in that notebook were written down all his plans for getting rid of the matches, and they weren't the most correct ones. The thought that Coral might have seen and read it all scared him. The girl, however, after some time of not being silent, smiled and asked what it even was. Then Kai exhaled with relief and laughed nervously, and said that there was nothing special there, and if she was having trouble keeping up with the scholarly material, she could just tell him that and he would be sure to help her. Coral thanked him and said that he was the only reason she felt like this semester was going to go very well too. Then the boy turned around and started to walk away, saying that he didn't need anything else. And after saying goodbye, he added that they would see her next time. Coral also said goodbye to him, and when she was alone, she was very sad at heart. By then, Calypso was still sitting behind the paperwork, and no matter how much she tried and struggled, there was no end to it. But nevertheless, she can't help herself, all because that's what her job has become ever since she signed the contract with the macaroni. So she has no way out. In fact, back then, when she was just about to sign a contract with him, or else she said that before she signed it, she would have one request. Calypso said that since she is his daughter-in-law, she also wants him to share his power with her. But the macaron looked then at his bride in surprise and asked why she needed it. Because along with power comes power, and a lot of work and obligations. Certainly it might have struck him as odd, after all. She had just looked like she was dodging a contract, and now asking for something like that. But since that was the case, she should do her best to make sure that Coral didn't suffer as much as they had to in the affair either. Therefore, it is imperative that she provide Kai with a good education and prepare the Krezu to be handed over to the boy's possession. Since the girl entered this house, she became the mistress of the castle as well, and if she does not fulfill her duties as a mistress, it may cause a wave of rumors and suspicions about her. So she must do everything necessarily right. And even if it's just a short-term contract, from that point on, she's still his wife and the mother of his children. In fact, the reason why the girl was so insistent back then is so that Coral would not hurt her. However, this would not only be better for Coral's future, but also for Kai's as well. And when she suggested it, and then she saw even a small smile on the macaroni's face, at that moment the girl thought she said something funny. Because of that he laughed, but she didn't give it a strong meaning. Anyway, that's how she had to deal with all the chores from the beginning. But luckily for her, she was almost done with the paperwork. Only a few more to go. She also needs to sort out Kai's education, which was her last assignment. Calypso read a letter stating that they wanted him to major in information science rather than general medicine. The girl actually really wishes Kai wasn't the same as Macaroni, and if he's destined to live as a member of the royal pharmaceutical family, that would be fine. However, he is destined for history to become the emperor himself. In fact, in the original, Gaius's life was full of various difficulties and hardships, and later on, although Kai will prove himself as a brilliant apothecary on the battlefield, his inability to master even basic sword skills will be the cause of great suffering. However, compared to what Coral has been experiencing before all this time, it's almost nothing, and the girl doesn't understand how she has to watch it all through her eyes while doing absolutely nothing about it. So she mentally apologized to the boy because he too would have liked to study pharmacy. But in the world, you can't just do what you want to do. So Calypso decided it would be best for him to start with sword lessons for Kai, and then he could talk to the macaroni about it. But just as she was about to do so, she realized that he was outright avoiding her. And even at lunchtime, he was always going somewhere. So the girl realized that, apparently, she would have to go to him herself to talk to him about his son's future. Soon the girl went straight to his office. Macaron was sitting at his desk and doing his usual errands. As soon as there was a knock on his door, he immediately said that it was okay to come in. When Calypso walked in, she was holding a tray with a teapot and a freshly brewed tea. The man looked at her in surprise, not sure what she was doing, and when he saw the tray in her hands, he asked why she did it. And then he wondered if making tea was also the wife's duty. The girl, pouring hot tea into his cup, said that if they didn't want various rumors about the sham nature of their marriage to spread everywhere, she should take care of such, even simple things. Well, then she looked at him sternly and asked, or did he think it would be better to live in one wing of the mansion, for the sake of making sure people didn't question it anymore? The girl realized that in any case, even if he refused, she would have to be a little more persistent. However, when she looked at her fictitious husband, she realized that he was very uncomfortable even at the thought of it. After calming down a bit, the macaron took his teacup and said that apparently she had not come just to say that. Therefore, he also added that if she wanted to tell him something, she should do it now while he had free time. Calypso was very happy to not procrastinate and get right to the point. Therefore, the girl said that she wanted him to start teaching Kai the art of swordsmanship, because it would be very important to him. Macaron, upon hearing this, was very surprised and immediately put the cup on the table, asking why he needed it at this point. The girl explained that usually boys in their empire started to be trained in swordsmanship as early as 7 years old, so she thought it was already time for him to start learning. The man apologized and said he didn't want to deal with such questions to Kai. He looked very serious. The girl was surprised, but the macaron said he wanted the man to enjoy peace and quiet in their palace, which he had created especially for him, instead of getting involved in the intrigues of noble society.